requirements, saving the people of Guam approximately $20 million in 2019. And with the passage of H.R. 1865 into law, we have brought our federal matching in Medicaid from 55% to 84%, and our cap in Medicaid from $18 million to $127 million, saving tens of millions of dollars in matching funds and enabling the program to help thousands more of our people. We have secured a firm commitment from the House to reimburse 75% of our earned income tax credit liabilities, approximately $40 million a year, with the language for that reimbursement included in H.R. 3300, H.R. 3307, H.R. 567, H.R. 6379, and H.R. 6800, with two of these measures passing the House with our language intact. We have unanimous bipartisan support for our Amendment 331 to the current National Defense Authorization Act, H.R. 6395, to extend our H-2B visa exemptions for civilian projects outside of defense, which will boost our peers to serve as vice chair. We have brought in unprecedented relief for our island and people. In the form of stimulus payments and UOG and GCC tuition reimbursements and fully federally funded unemployment benefits, we have put over $1 billion directly into the pockets of our people, rescuing the livelihoods of over 36,000 of our people and their families. We have kept over 3,500 businesses from closing their doors, with over $275 million in forgivable PPP and EIDL loans, which further ensured that up to 32,000 private sector jobs had direct support. In addition to the $200 million in tax revenues these have generated, we've secured $117 million in relief direct to the government of Guam, and an additional $85 million in aggregate to health, education, and public safety. The whole island of Guam, from households to businesses to the government of Guam, has been kept afloat with $1.6 billion in relief and counting. An exponential difference from the mere $6 million we received during the 1995 Asian economic crisis, the 1998 bursting of the dot-com bubble, the year 2000 provisions for Y2K, and the 2001 attack on the Twin Towers combined. Not only have we secured an unprecedented level of support for our island, we have also engaged in an unprecedented level of local advocacy. To put it plainly, your congressional office speaks up for the people of Guam. We have sent a dozen engagement letters to the Guam legislature, the governor, ComNavMar, and our private sector on various subjects that directly benefit our people, including sharing solutions to pay remaining war claimants without the need for time-consuming federal legislation. Research our office has done to enable essential workers to be paid using programs adopted by the state of Pennsylvania. Research we have also done to access all government CARES Act funds for rental assistance, so we are not limiting ourselves to those related to HUD grants. We have even sent a letter almost a year ago that would have started the process to have our Guam Museum become an affiliate museum of the Smithsonian. We speak up for these issues because we need to have all options on the table for our people to recover as quickly as we can, and for our local foundation to be situated for the work we have ahead. With Guam currently reliant on federal spending and tourism, we have ensured that up to $990 million in military buildup funding was authorized during our term. We have introduced H.R. 7986 to create a process for eligible Guam contractors to classify as native corporations, similar to their Alaska and Hawaiian counterparts we have seen on Guam, an option we have had since 1988, opening up greater access to up to $30 billion in federal contracting under the 8A program. We have introduced H.R. 8029 to study our heritage areas on Guam and get funding for our historic and cultural sites, an option we have had since 1994 that would bring in millions in new federal dollars and funding site improvements to our visitor industry. We have done all of this in 1 year and 9 months in office. It has been the honor of a lifetime to work and deliver for you. We wish to continue this level of service for you, and we'll do so if you will so have us. Thank you, and Sijulis Maasi.
Thank you, Congressman Sam Nicholas. Next, I'd like to introduce our second congressional candidate. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll introduce Senator William Castro. And William Castro serves currently as senator in the 35th Guam legislature. He is chairman on the subcommittee on charter, independent and home schools, public libraries, and technology centers, and is a vice chairman on the Committee on Education. Senator Castro has experience in both the public and private sectors, working as the director of Bureau of Statistics and Plans and as the senior staff during the Cal Tenorio administration. He is also a small business owner providing services in e-commerce, technology, and planning. Senator Castro holds a master's degree from Harvard University with additional graduate credits from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he has attained doctoral candidacy status at Columbia University. He is a member of the Young Men's League of Guam, the Knights of Columbus, and is active in the Barrigada Neighborhood Watch Program. Members and guests, I am pleased to welcome our congressional candidate, Senator Will Castro.
Afede Todo Santo, thank you, Ms. Castro, and everybody, especially to the membership of the Chamber for the privilege to address you during this congressional forum. Afede to the people of Guam, it's my extreme privilege to be here to share some of my thoughts and introduce my qualifications. It's my hope today that you walk away from this exchange of ideas and contrasting views so that we can see what this common man with an uncommon passion towards serving the island is capable of doing as your next delegate. 6 months into this pandemic with no clear end in sight. In these trying times, what is clear is that Guam needs an active advocate, a diplomat, someone who's willing to be an engaging force on behalf of the community in the nation's capital, a respectable representative with the character, the capacity, and the commitment, and the plan to lift us all out of this crisis into a level of human security for Guam in this era of uncertainty. Someone who has proven his real love for the island, as evidence in all things we know about the candidate, how they treat their family, how they respect their loved ones, how they work with their colleagues, and even how they dispose and deal with their enemies. I also believe that you can see how a candidate loves his community by how he involves himself in civic organizations, to include the Child's PTA. But I'm running because I bring forth an option and leadership style in the overall policy direction. I'm running because aside from having a real love for this island, I believe that my record on and off the field, so to speak, bodes well for the challenges that we must tackle facing this community during this pandemic. I bring forth experiences from public and private sectors, my principles as a Catholic gentleman, and a value-added dimension as a father and active member of civic organizations to the position of delegate to the House of Representatives. I served in both the executive and legislative branches as a director, as a chief planner, as a teacher. I've worked in the private sector in K through 12 as a director, as a planner. I've also maintained a business in technology and provided consulting to various organizations throughout the region. And yes, I am a member of the Young Men's League of Guam and the Knights of Columbus. Most important, I bring my life experiences as a father of 4 children, one of whom just graduated from the University of Guam, so Biba UOG and Biba to the biology majors out there. And I list these things because of the time limitations, I've summarized my qualifications, but I think it's important that you, the people of Guam, those who are listening and watching this morning, are able to make a determination as to who has the depth and the width of experiences, the professional maturity and the emotional intelligence to make the right decisions, to work well with others, to work hard towards accomplishing the goals set forth by the people of Guam. Last, in my service as your senator, I made it a point to carry myself with integrity, to be dynamic, to be innovative, to build bridges among and between us regardless of party lines, regardless of philosophical differences, in order that we can achieve a common goal. Because I believe then, as I believe now, when I served the late Senator Angel Santos and under my continued mentorship under Eddie Baza-Capel, that in order to best understand and discern, to empathize, to be able to lead with the consent of the government, you must be among them. You must be among them, whether you're on the side of the road in a pop-up tent, or visiting working families in Swamp Road, or coming up close and personal to look at an eroding shoreline in the coastal village of Humate. That is, of course, if you're attempting to achieve meaningful and lasting change for the people of Guam. But above all, despite the differences in philosophy or policy or even political provocations, I have always conducted myself, I've always strived to conduct myself in a manner that's consistent with our Pacific way of life, with our Chamorro way of life, with that of respect. Wahoo si William Castro. I'm the son of a customs officer and a full-time homemaker who since passed. Malalagudzup po Delegado, I humbly ask for your vote to be Guam's next delegate to the United States House of Representatives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Next, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you our third congressional candidate, Dr. Robert Underwood. And Dr. Underwood recently served as president of the University of Guam from 2008 until July 2018. During his tenure at UOG, he established the Center for Island Sustainability, developed GOREX, making the university a global hub for information technology. He also secured EPSCoR status for the National Science Foundation, ensuring the university the most substantial research grants in its history, including a new $20 million grant for marine lab research. In his career, he served as a classroom teacher, a curriculum writer, school administrator, Guam School Board member, Dean of College of Education and academic vice president of the University of Guam. Dr. Underwood served as Guam delegate to the U.S. Congress from 1993 to 2003. He played an active role in the U.S. Department of Defense authorization bills, where he was an advocate for political development for insular areas and the extension of educational and social opportunities for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Dr. Underwood graduated from JFK High School in 1965. He has a doctorate in education from the University of Southern California and a BA and MA in history from Cal State University in Los Angeles. He has a distinguished national record of professional. He has a distinguished national record of professional and government achievement. And he was appointed to the National Advisory Council on Bilingual Education by President Jimmy Carter, named to the National Board of Educational Sciences by President Barack Obama, appointed to the Board of Trustees for American Folk Life Center by Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and received the Guam Humanities Council Lifetime Achievement Award, the Citizen of the Year Award from the National Advisory Council on Bilingual Education, and the Alumnus of the Year from Cal State, Los Angeles. Members and guests, I'm pleased to welcome congressional candidate Dr. Robert Underwood.
Hafaday, and good morning to you, Chairwoman Boleto, President Castro, Mr. Galito, my fellow candidates for this office, and members of the chamber, and all of you who are watching and listening in. COVID-19 has taken out of our hands the capacity to plan for a future based on old assumptions. It has changed the lives of our people, created enormous job loss, and certainly a lot of uncertainty. Members of the chamber who normally make important economic decisions now find themselves having gut-wrenching decisions, talking to loyal employees about job security and hours. We certainly need the relief that the federal government provides to all Americans, but more importantly, we need a plan going forward. And we need representation in Washington, D.C. that can articulate that plan for all of us, inside the chamber, outside the chamber, in government offices and in coffee shops, with partners in the region and with grassroots leaders in our villages. We need an economic plan that takes full advantage of our strategic importance, geographical location, standing as a U.S. jurisdiction, and the enormous energy and entrepreneurial spirit which exists here at home. Years ago, I asked the Library of Congress to prepare a map that outlines which location has the access to the most people within a 5.5 hour flight. Guam beat out Honolulu, Denver, New York, and Los Angeles. We are at the edge of Asia, and this explains our position as a visitor destination and our military strategic value. But we are more than just a geographic hub for military activities. We now have 11 undersea cables with 2 plans. We have an institution, a maturing research institution at the University of Guam. We have the possibility of capital flight from nearby areas like Hong Kong. In fact, undersea cables, which were planned for Hong Kong and Taiwan, may even be looking for safer locations now. All of these suggest areas of entrepreneurial activities unimaginable a few years ago, but which I learned about from students and researchers at UOG and other universities around the region. Understanding these possibilities and linking them to the Chamber's Silicon Valley Village, training institutions, clearing away federal hurdles, make a brighter future, not just a dream, but a plan if we have the right people and the right idea. I understand that our existing economy is based on federal military spending and the visitor industry, and I recognize that we need to maximize local benefits from the military buildup, as well as seek relief from financial burdens caused by federal policies, such as compact impact migration and Medicaid and EITC policies. I know that the visitor industry needs to be revived based on distinctive immigration policies. But I also know that the future of Guam must be diversified based on those assets I just outlined and a knowledge-based economy, which links research to technology, to entrepreneurial skills in areas as diverse as coral reef research, undersea cables, information technology, agriculture, biosciences. To some extent, all candidates may say these things, but the decision you must make is not just who can make the case for what we want, but who can make the case for bringing us together to make a compelling case in Washington, D.C. Which one of us has a proven record of working with people, not just across the aisle and not by switching aisles? Which candidate has a real record of achievement supported by facts? A record of achievement supported by facts and not just assertions. Which one has the successful experience of problem solving in difficult situations? Who really understands the dynamics of the region and the military and federal policy making and the potential of Guam's young people in a way that allows us to plan for a future with hope and which fulfills our best aspirations to have our young people stay right here in Guam in high-paying jobs that can raise a family. From my first term in the 103rd Congress and hosting the Capitol Hill Economic Conference to the constant and consistent effort of my office in Washington, D.C., and even in Manila as president of the university, I have worked consistently to bring together different ideas and perspectives to benefit the island, always being a forceful advocate of local empowerment, both for our people and for our government. Every delegation that comes from Guam will be afforded respect, time, and dignity in Washington, D.C. It is the delegate's responsibility to give you that courtesy to each one of you. Job one is to put people back to work. Job two is to allow you to share the good news of economic activities with your colleagues and your employees. Job three is for you to decide who amongst us will actually bring about job one, two. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood, for that, your opening remarks. Next on our agenda, we're going to start asking the questions of each of the candidates, and we'll wait for their answer. They have a 2-minute reply. And so I'm going to ask Congressman Sam Nicholas to answer the first question. And these next questions will be associated with military buildup, a vital component of Guam's economy. So the first question is, Congress is currently discussing the National Defense Authorization Act, which provides funding for military projects located right here on Guam. If you were in office today, which sections of the NDAA would you attempt to modify to make it more favorable for our island and our community? Congressman Sam Nicholas.
Thank you for the question. We are currently in office today. We have the privilege, and we've worked to, first of all, ensure that the funds keep flowing. That's the first priority. The commitments that have been made need to constantly be reauthorized every year, and we're making sure those reauthorizations happen to the tune of $990 million in this first term in office. Beyond that, we've worked very closely with the Armed Services Committee of the Guam Chamber to be able to identify what the priorities are in order for us to be able to work towards those in the NDAA. And in our most recent meetings, we have, of course, identified numerous areas to address, but we've also identified the need for us to be a little bit more strategic than we have been in how we're going about getting the outcomes that we're looking for. And in the most recent meeting that we had, in the most recent advocacy that we both worked on, we had identified the need for us to have H-2B workers able to work on the civilian side of the fence. That has been acknowledged over the years as something that's holding back our construction industry pretty dramatically. It's caused the cost per square foot to almost double on our island. It's resulted in an impact on the ancillary jobs associated with construction, like heavy equipment rental and operators, bookkeepers who will be responsible for the accounting of those equipment and the rentals, the ordering and the shipping, and the warehousing and the product sales that happen in our hardware stores. All of these ancillary industries are negatively impacted by the lack of construction, as well as our housing industry, the inventories that we have, the home prices that we have, the price for rent, and the ability for our real estate workers to be able to generate economic activity in that way. That being said, we focused our efforts on getting a huge breakthrough in the NDAA in this recent version. We have the amendment language in there. We got it in there with unanimous support. With unanimous support from 3 different committees, and we're very excited about being able to see that through. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, I'd like Senator Will Castro to answer the question.
Good good morning. So if I was given the privilege to serve in the House right now at this point in time to make certain modifications to the NDAA, I think it goes without saying that you want to insert amendments like the Congressman has. And I think that's the obligation of any congressperson to find a way around the restrictive change in policy since 2016 relative not just to H-2B visas, but to H-1 and all H visas. But I think this is a time not to restrict that conversation just to the H-2B visa situation that's emanating out of the White House. If I had the privilege to serve you, I would think this would be an opportune time to bring up issues relative to our military posture, to leverage opportunities for Guam's homeland security posture, to build a stronger regional position with our jurisdictional neighbors. I also like to insert into that conversation something that would piggyback upon the exchange and commissary improvements. In addition to that, I think there's a case to be made that Guam should make additional investments with the assistance of the federal government in the provision of the NDAA to look at the U.S. Cyber Command mission for Guam. Last but not least, if I have the opportunity, I'd certainly want to revisit Guam's shipyard and infrastructure and optimization plan. I think this is a great time to be able to reassert ourselves as the focal point of the territory, not just the territory, but the region, for economic trade, to support military missions throughout the Pacific, and also to secure those jobs for Guam. In a nutshell, I can agree that it's been the commitment of every delegate, to include the incumbent, to look at the H-1B, H-2B, J-1 visas in the context of the NDAA. But as the first speaker mentioned, or the last speaker, forgive me, in terms of being entrepreneurial, this would be the opportune time. These COVID circumstances require that we assert ourselves, that we think outside the box, and that we attempt to power network to bring opportunities that are not currently before the people of Guam. This is not business as usual, and if given the privilege to do so, I'd like to bring that case to the Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Next, I'll ask Dr. Underwood to answer question number 1.
Hafiday, the best way to amend the NDAA Act is to sit on the Armed Services Committee. And if I were in the Armed Services Committee, I would offer 6 specific ideas just off the top of my head. Of course, I would work to extend the H visa caps for Guam and the CNMI, which expire in 2023. But I would do so in a clearer fashion than even the amendment offered by the incumbent, which still sort of makes it unclear as to whether DOD or DHS is the controlling element in that decision making. But more importantly, I would have added to that to make sure that DOD and DOL work together to increase training funding for the 30,000 people that are unemployed. Every time we use an opportunity to increase H2 and H1 workers, we need to increase the opportunity for local workers. I would have worked to include a provision that addresses increased roles for the Guam Air Army, Guam Air National Guard, including a flying mission, and also has the National Guard to include it as a cyber unit, so which is consistent with the National Defense Strategy and which will help potential economic activities. I would have sought to ensure that the 5G pilot programs, which are established in NDAA and being executed by DOD, include Guam. For the reasons I just mentioned, we have these undersea cables. We're sitting on the precipice of enormous IT changes here. The COVID-19 emergency has also given us a look at how fragile our healthcare system is. I would have actively worked with the Office of Economic Adjustment for that $19 million new public health lab on Guam, which the governor basically almost had to work on her own to include in this, but I would have also sought more funding. And lastly, we have to protect our resources. I would have inserted language to call for the monitoring of the Guam aquifer by ongoing and anticipated military activity.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. For the next question, I'm going to ask Will Castro to answer this question. It's a three-part question, and it reads, do you believe that the present programmatic agreement needs to be modified? And if so, which sections would you recommend amending? And how would those changes impact the ongoing buildup? And before you start, Senator Castro, for the benefit of the audience, the programmatic agreement is among the Department of Defense, the Advisory Council of Historic Preservation, the Guam State Historic Preservation Officer, the CNMI State Historic Preservation Officer, and it's regarding the military relocations to the islands of Guam and Tinian. Senator, your answer, please.
Hafaday, thank you so much for the question, Ernie. Obviously, anyone who picks up the paper and is in tune with contemporary issues will find that there are deep problems with the programmatic agreement. We've seen that when questions relative to an indigenous species was compromised up there in Anderson Air Force Base. Most recently, we're starting to see deep concerns relative to the handling of sacred remains. If I had the privilege to step forward and request that we modify the programmatic agreement, I think I'd look at two fundamental issues. Perhaps the mitigation strategy that would initiate an immediate halt, especially when it comes to the handling of human remains. I would also like to see a fundamental change in terms of who has oversight and general supervision over the excavation, the curation, and quite hopefully the interment of these human remains to remain with the government of Guam and the SHPO office. Those are the two fundamental changes to the programmatic agreement that I'd like to see happen so that these allegations of infractions upon the mishandling of artifacts and or human remains can be examined more closely and fully investigated with the local government at the table. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Next, I'd like to ask Dr. Underwood to get his views on this question.
Today, the programmatic agreement is supposed to be a living and breathing document that is nearly 10 years old. It is appropriate from time to time to have the stakeholders take a look at it to see that it reflects the original intent of this. The uncovering of the ancient Chamorro village in Magua and its destruction was a tragedy that should have been avoided and could have been avoided if we had active stakeholders, representatives from the chamber, the activists, the environmentalists, small business owners, all sitting around the table and taking a good look at it. Current processes and procedures need to be revised in order to include more joint planning and some independent review as the rest of the activity which will go on at Northwest Field and Andy South and other areas are worked on. Revising or reviewing the programmatic agreement should not be used as a tool to stop realignment construction activities, but it should be used as a tool to prevent the destruction of Guam history, such as the site at Magua. Much of the damage may have been done in previous military construction decades ago, but the protection of these sites continues to remain a DoD responsibility. Environmental regulations, the application of the Endangered Species Act, and the preservation of cultural areas do not exist to frustrate military activities. They exist to balance our values as a society. I have seen these at work at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. The people of Guam deserve the same kind of treatment that their fellow Americans get in North Carolina and Hawaii when it comes to protecting their environment and their cultural resources and their history. This is the purpose of the programmatic agreement, and we should continually review it in order to refine it and make sure it remains true to its original purpose.
Thank you very much, Dr. Underwood. Next, I'd like to call on Congressman Sam Nicholas to give his views on this question.
Thank you, Ernie, for the question. I think it's important to open and clarify that to date there has been no violations of the programmatic agreement. I repeat, there's been no violations of the programmatic agreement. If there were, the local government would have recourse to be able to take the federal government to court and file the necessary injunctions and actions in order to halt or change course or require a review of the alleged violations of the programmatic agreement. So we need to clarify that, because while the programmatic agreement may have been in place for the last 10 years, the reality is that the buildup's progress has been slowed over all those years as well. But what we have seen since the buildup has initiated is that the programmatic agreement has served its purpose. And we see that when we have the local government being able to speak up and call to account the federal government and the military and the construction projects that are ongoing up there on the base. The recent discovery of the remains during the buildup construction is a classic example of how the programmatic agreement is working. Because when those remains were discovered, the necessary triggers initiated, the right actions were taken, and I have to credit the Admiral himself, who I called personally, and who assured me that we're going to be addressing these remains even before they've identified and confirmed that they were ancient remains. They're still treating them as if they are, in order to ensure they're taking maximum precautions. So as of right now, I'm not too keen on pushing changes to the programmatic agreement. It so far is working. There have been no violations. And as long as we're being good partners at the table, and it's most especially as long as the military is being good partners at the table, I look forward to continuing the work of all parties to ensure the programmatic agreement is upheld and that the proper respect is afforded to our cultural sites, while we also move forward the very necessary and long delayed military buildup. Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you very much, Congressman. On this next question, again, refers to the programmatic agreement. I'm going to ask Dr. Underwood to answer this question. Do you support the present data collection process for the preservation of historical artifacts? If not, what methodology would you support, and would this recommendation create further delays for the ongoing buildup? Dr. Underwood?
Okay. I generally support the data collection process. However, I want to point out that the process of collecting and preserving historical artifacts should not be misunderstood simply as objects, but belonging to people. But also they include the remains of human beings as well as artifacts, which serve as evidence of the complexity of life here on Guam, people that we are connected to. They are important items in the string of history, which gives meaning to who we are today. We need to make sure that the data collection processes and the data collectors understand this fact. If this is accepted and honored, I believe this process can be done without a significant delay of buildup. And that has to be predicated on continual communication, which seemed to be lacking in the case of the Magua. Let's be real. The Magua destruction was maybe not a technical breach of the programmatic agreement, but the Magua destruction was something that could have been avoided. These rules do not exist to inconvenient construction, but to ensure that the past is put into proper perspective. The Office of Economic Adjustment, with whom I've worked with for many years, has proposed building a cultural repository facility at UOG, which will be the home to these artifacts. The plans are excellent, but they need to be augmented with resources for staffing and maintenance of the artifacts for study and display. I will work to make sure that the innovative solutions to make sure this facility is adequately staffed for the long run. Hey, you know what? That's another idea for the NDAA, which you can do if you're sitting inside the Armed Services Committee. Additionally, I support the creation of using federal resources to create a heat map. A heat map will help developers understand where environmental hotspots are and cultural hotspots are before they engage in construction.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. Next, I'd like to ask Congressman Sam Nicholas to give his viewpoints on this question.
Similar to my response in the programmatic agreement with respect to data collection and preservation, again, I feel like the actions so far have been pretty substantial, particularly when you compare them to what we have to compare locally. We have enormous federal resources being deployed for the purposes of data collection and preservation, just on the military buildup site project alone. I mean, for reference, Ernie, and to be real, when we have projects throughout the island, we have nowhere near this level of archaeological and heritage and historical expertise supporting or looking out for those kinds of issues. We have our Guam resources, but in this military buildup, we have our Guam resources who are being watchdogs over the federal resources. So the collection and preservation activities so far, which were part of the initial understandings that were determined when we initiated this military buildup project, I believe are so far working. And I believe that as these sites are uncovered, the proper triggers are being initiated as we have agreed to, and the proper oversight is being conducted to include our local government. We can always promise that we're going to go into the NDAA and we're going to add things to it in order to augment what's out there. But the reality is that we already have things that are in place, and we can only ask for so much when we're going to the table and trying to secure resources for military projects. Securing $990 million in continued funding is already a big accomplishment. Securing an H-2B amendment to be able to address that issue is an accomplishment that my previous incumbent, my predecessor, who had 16 years of seniority, wasn't able to do. We need to be understanding of the fact that while we want to continue to pursue other avenues, we need to be also upfront about the fact that we aren't going to be able to deliver on everything that we're promising just because we're saying it in a forum.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, I'd like to ask Senator Castro. Please give us your viewpoint on this important question.
Hafide, my prior response is the same, that I really believe that the current process of the Department of Defense conducting the archaeological work and data collection, especially with the handling of human remains, should shift to the local authorities. I'd like to see an improved process in the handling of human remains, one that is much more collaborative in nature, perhaps with the direct supervision of the SHPO. I'd like to see personally, and it's not a matter of science, I don't think it's as simple as an infraction and going through the checklist of 1, 2, 3, A, B, and C. I think the handling of human remains based on my value system is something that needs to be closely tied to how we view ourselves and our ancestors, how we value the identity of this great Chamorro nation. I really believe that when it's placed into the hands of those who care the most about the most of us as Chamorros, that we'll see that these remains and artifacts are properly handled and not put in a cardboard box and put in some historic area in terms of an air-conditioned facility. My culture and my heritage means that much more to me. I think we just need to look to the north and see how they place tremendous value on the internment of human remains. And for me, that says a lot in terms of who I am as a member of this community. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I think it needs to shift from the data collection to the handling of ancient remains, from the Department of Defense to the direct supervision of the people of Guam vis-a-vis the government of Guam and the SHPO. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sam Nicholas. And I'd just like to welcome anybody who's come to join us on the Congressional Forum. If you missed the opening remarks, and also you're now just joining us, you're watching us live via GoToWebinar. And this is the Guam Chamber of Commerce Congressional Forum. And our invited guests are U.S. Congressman Sam Nicholas, Dr. Robert Underwood, and Senator Will Castro. And next, we're going to ask a question a little more tuned in to the military buildup again, outside of the programmatic agreement. So I'm going to ask Congressman Sam Nicholas to answer this next question. And the question posed is, do you support the continuation of H-2B and H-1B visa cap exemption for Guam and the CNMI? And if elected, would you champion the extensions? If not, how would you address the skilled labor shortages that our island presently faces? Congressman.
Thank you, Ernie. I think in our opening statement, and maybe in one other instance throughout this forum, I've already indicated that we not only support enhancing the H-2B access, but we are actually taking action on it. As far as the cap and its expiration, of course, we're definitely going to be interested in extending that, and we'll address that when its time comes due. And between now and then, of course, we need to make sure the H-2B visas are extended onto the civilian side of the fence. That being said, I think that we've kind of belabored the point, at least with respect to where I stand on that. I really believe that we need to stand up our construction industry. We need to have ancillary industries that are dependent on that industry to be able to stand up as well. We need our real estate market to be able to benefit from what the outcomes will be if we're able to re-access that resource. And it's going to be good for Guam. You know, I really think that as much as we want to create local jobs, that's one area that's been an opportunity for years, but we have not developed the local workforce for it. So we got to make sure that we're not having that roadblock in place any further, getting H-2Bs outside for the civilian projects, and of course, extending the cap. Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, I'd like to ask Senator Will Castro. Please give us your viewpoint on this question on H-2B and H-1B visa cap.
Sure. The question is, do I support the continuation of the exemptions for Guam for H-2B, H-1B? Yeah, to be absolutely clear, I think everyone knows that the caps have had a deleterious effect upon the economy. We have seen firsthand how it has contributed to the skyrocketing costs associated with construction and home ownership. We've also seen how it's affected tourism industries. We've seen how it affects skilled labor positions even at the local private hospital. Of course, I agree to support the exemptions. I think the case needs to be made, whoever's in Congress, that Guam is a geographically disparate area, that we're in fact very separate. We don't have access to the same labor pools. We have to make the case that we need this skilled labor from wherever it's going to come from. But that shouldn't stop us from working with the University of Guam and the new School of Engineering that's coming up to continue to power network with the Guam Trades Academy to utilize the local population and workforce so that they can transition into these positions. But until then, we're experiencing as a territory unprecedented military construction in the region and on the territory in particular. So until we have the critical mass of skilled labor, there's no way around it. If we want people to be able to afford their next home, we certainly have to petition and advocate for continued exception to H visas and all other associated skill visas. I don't only support that exemption for Department of Defense construction activity behind the fence, I certainly think it should be a blanket exception for all skilled labor positions outside of the fence. I think that we can do this in collaboration with the Chamber, our partners from the other jurisdictions who can make the same case. I think we can leverage our build-up position based on spatial economics and location. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next, Dr. Underwood, please give us your viewpoints on this question.
Yes, of course, we should continue the cap exemption even when it comes up, but this affords us another opportunity to consider what should we be doing in addition to lifting the cap. And I believe very strongly that there's two things we can do. One, this points up the fact that we are in a unique situation along with the Northern Marianas and suggests, in keeping with the original passage of the 2008 Consolidated Natural Resources Act, that there be consideration to a kind of a unique immigration zone for Guam and the Northern Marianas. We should work together in order to be able to manage labor better, in order to be able to access skilled labor better, in order to manage our visitor industry. We're a unique part of America, and we're a distant part of America. So in addition to lifting the caps, we should work on a proactive solution. The other thing is that we have to couple all of these caps to responding to labor needs, have to be coupled to support for local labor. Every dollar that we spend on foreign workers must be matched by significant DOL funds and fees to train local workers and give them the jobs they need. We have 30,000 people who are unemployed right now, maybe more, seeking some kind of unemployment benefit. We need to make an earnest effort to train these people. We need to make sure, just the health crisis has indicated that there's thousands of people needed in healthcare industry on Guam. So all of these things suggest that we shouldn't look at this lifting of the cap in isolation. Of course, we should lift it. Of course, we should get on with construction, but we have to tie it to our economic future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. This next question, I'm going to ask Senator Castro to answer it first. And we pose, while the Guam Chamber of Commerce supports economic diversification, tourism remains the essential pillar of our community and our lifeline for all of our small businesses. We have seen ramifications from the CDC, Center for Disease Control, in its categorization of Guam as a foreign destination. So this is a two-part question. How would you ensure that our issues and our status are apparent in DC to benefit tourism? And what moves would you make to guarantee a pool of labor for our island?
First of all, I think the designation by the CDC, we've seen that it's a travesty. It speaks to the ignorance of certain federal officials. I'm glad the governor was able to clarify that and increase their awareness of who we are as a Pacific territory. I want to approach this question from three prongs. First, from the most immediate, federal relief packages. I really believe that we need to advocate that more money goes into the hands of businesses and to the common person and less into the central government. Second to that, Ernie, I think we need to harden the pillars of this economy. I think we need to take full advantage of our advocacy to alleviate some of the caps and the restrictions that have been besetting us in terms of the H visas and other restrictions that affect our local industry since 2016. In addition to that, economic diversification, in my humble opinion, should include things that are strategic commodities, things that speak to issues of food sovereignty and production, to be able to serve a strategic role, not just for the military in terms of positioning of its arms, but in terms of supplying food, not just for the military, but for all of the region. I really think there's an opportunity to develop, as one of the speakers mentioned, this knowledge-based economy. But for me, in areas of high technology, cyber terrorism, drone preparation, the skilled workforces in the medical sciences, these are the ways I think we can shore up and diversify the economy. I'd like to look at things like cyber tech and space technology that's come here, that's knocking on our doorstep. So in a nutshell, with the 30 seconds remaining to recap again, look at it from three ways. The immediate relief packages coming in from either the White House or the Congress, to also shore up the pillars of the economy and address those repressive policies that are besetting this economy, and to look at strategic commodities that we could take advantage of so we can achieve a level of human security for this specific territory. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Next, I'd like to call on Dr. Underwood. Please give us your comments on this question.
Thank you again for this opportunity. You know, we have to tell the Guam story consistently and push back against general ignorance about Guam. That's all of our responsibility. But it is up to the delegate to consistently tell the Guam story and to say its needs, how we came under the US flag, and what Guam means to the country. This is what I mean about emphasizing our strategic assets. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking for a fair hand in policy that is equal to our value to the country, which in this part of the world is immeasurable. In keeping with the 2008 Consolidated Natural Resource Act, which I mentioned earlier, the governor has the right to petition DHS and ask for additional countries to the Guam CNMI visa waiver program. I would work with the governor and with the CNMI to explore that possibility with Vietnam, Malaysia, and other Asian countries. But as I stated earlier, we need to find a joint solution to the migration of people. And the best hope for that, I believe, relies on establishing the special immigration zone, which is there, which was the pattern was suggested about 10 years ago. We are part of the US, but we are far away from the US mainland. We should be allowed to take advantage of our unique location and strength, not just for military purposes, but for economic purposes and for our own sustainability as an island society. We would be a more favorable area for foreign investment and the placement of facilities which need the protection and security of US law. It could even have implications for transportation and air route flexibility. I would even work with GBV to see if existing COVID stimulus funding could be used to supplement local funding to help expand our tourism and destination brand to other locations. The problem of labor is tied not just to bringing it in, but it is also tied to helping those that are unemployed find jobs.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. And next, I'd like to call on Congressman Sam Nicholas. And my apologies, Congressman, I misidentified you in that last question, so my apologies. But please give us your viewpoint.
Actually, I think it was Senator Castro who you misidentified, and we're all good with that. I know Will and I are easy picking, so no worries there, Ernie. But to answer your first question about the CDC issue, the CDC has been around since 1946. That's very, very important to have in perspective of the question, because that error that they made in reference to Guam isn't an error that was as a result of something that happened in the last year or 9 months. That's an error of the fact that Guam has not done enough to be able to get front of mind of these agencies that have been around way before I've been born, way before I think everybody's been born. And so, 1946, the CDC was established, and that speaks to the lack of Guam getting out there, the lack of Guam getting on the map. And that's why we did things differently this term. That's why we took the Financial Services Committee, so that we can get on that committee and speak to national issues and get national attention for Guam on things that all Americans are concerned about. Not just the narrow issues that, of course, Guam is interested in with the military or with the Natural Resources Committee, but speaking on things like making sure that we have the right oversight of the Treasury or the Federal Reserve, making sure that companies are being accountable to shareholders. And with Guam speaking to those big issues, that's what gets Guam noticed. That's what gets Guam put on the map. And aside from just telling the Guam story, we need to have Guam be an active participant in the national discourse. And that's what we've done. And that's something that I'm very, very happy that we did, because it's also put us in line to be able to be involved in the conversation of all the other all of the other relief packages that we were able to get through. The second question that you asked is with respect to the labor pool. And I believe that we will always have access to labor. I think what we need to really be asking is, how do we create more jobs? We need to diversify our economy, and we're looking at doing that with our work on the Ex-Im Bank, trying to create export-oriented industries for our island, so that our people will be able to decide what industries they want to go work in, and we can create high-paying jobs for our people, so that we can attract more people to come home from the States and take on those jobs that we have set up in all of our industries. Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, I'd like to call on Dr. Underwood to answer this next question. And we may have discussed about this in previous Q&A, but now this is your chance, as well as the other candidates, to give us more specifics. And our question posed to you is, our economy is obviously in trouble. Other than the military buildup, if elected, what actions would you take to help diversify our economy, both for the short term and for the long run?
I have argued in numerous venues that we need a knowledge-based economy for diversification. Knowledge economy is based upon the quantity, quality, and accessibility of information more than just the means of production. Young entrepreneurs know this, and based on research in coral reefs, biosciences, aquaculture, IT, almost any field combined with the information infrastructure in Guam offers a huge array of opportunities for high-tech jobs. And the transfer of research into economic activities. UOG just won a $20 million research grant which itself is supposed to contribute to economic growth. Included in this vision is building our digital economy based on our information technology. Guam stands at the crossroads of significant fiber optic cables that are barely tapped for use in Guam. Combined with the growing challenges of doing business in China and questions about security in China, along with the ongoing instability in Hong Kong, is an opportunity for Guam to position itself as a digital hub in Asia, based on the existing 11 cables, 2 planned ones, and perhaps others directed here because of the insecurity. I would work and reach out to companies like Google and Microsoft and others and partner them with local officials to explore possibilities of setting up data centers. We could become the data super hub of the Pacific because of our geography, the assets I talked about, our geography, and the security provided by US law. Further, I would leverage this unique opportunity as a way by inviting DoD to put in their 5G pilot program here in Guam. We have a unique opportunity to capitalize on the situation and develop this third leg, high-tech, information-laden, knowledge-driven economy that takes advantage of our young people. We also need to take a look at our medical services and our medical infrastructure and provide those opportunities.
Thank you so much for your answer. Next, I'd like to call on Congressman Sam Nicholas. Can you give us more specifics on this question?
Thank you for the question, Ernie. We can talk about diversifying our economy all we want. We've been doing that for my entire life. I remember growing up and hearing the discussion about diversifying. We need tangibles. We need tangibles, and we need to start getting it done. And that's exactly what we've been delivering over the last year and 9 months. Our bill for native contracting will allow for our local contractors to be able to avail of $30 billion more in federal contracts throughout the United States, bringing those federal dollars into Guam. Our bill for National Heritage Area designations that will allow for our sites, World War II sites, our cultural sites, even our natural sites to become eligible for federal dollars will not only bring in the federal money to support those sites, but it will also upgrade them and upkeep them for our visitors to be able to come, respect, and enjoy. Beyond those two areas, we've also had tangibles of the Export-Import Bank. We've had our first Ex-Im outreach to Guam, and they've been around since 1936. These companies provide financing support for Guam businesses to be able to find US-made products and ship them out into Asia, taking advantage of what our historical role was as a trading hub going all the way back to ancient times. And lastly, we also have the financial services industry opportunities, and we've been doing a lot of work working with SIFMA, the Securities Financial Management Group, to be able to reach out to these companies that are being affected by Hong Kong and other areas and look at Guam and reconsider Guam, because to bring financial industries here would require very little infrastructure investment from what we already have on the ground. So we need tangibles. We're working on those tangibles. Let's stop talking about diversifying and let's keep the work going to get the diversification done. Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, I'd like to ask Senator Castro. Please give us your viewpoint and specifics on this question.
This is always an exciting topic, and thank you for giving the opportunity to expound. To get to it, I think the greatest potential rests in our ability to gain strategic partnerships and advantages with our northern neighbors. There's a lot of good going on here, but let me start with our domestic front. You got good things going on with like the Lim Tiaco family and producing those strategic commodities to feed not just the military, but the entire island. But I'd like to stretch your mind for a minute. Couldn't we wrest control and have greater jurisdiction and self-governance over things like our maritime resources? Could we get around the Commerce Clause and other restrictive federal policies to partner, as my other colleague had mentioned here, partner with the Singham? I've been working on this One Marianas initiative for the greater part of 8 years. Couldn't we develop a viable fisheries industry? Couldn't we develop tax and tariff-free trade between us and the jurisdiction to the north of us so that we have strategic commodities, lemai from the north, sweet corn from Guam, so that we can leverage the ability to produce these crops for the sake of food security, for the sake of nutritious consumption, for jobs on Guam and throughout the Marianas. And then when we get to that, perhaps we can push the envelope to arrest jurisdiction over those resources in our waters, things that lead to scientific discoveries? Couldn't we treat the distance between us and the neighboring territory, Commonwealth to be exact, as a sea lane, so that we can trade not just between jurisdictions, but construe that under federal policy or rule of law, or even just the rule of application as delineated by the White House, that is in fact a lane that's free of tax and tariff-free trade, because we're considered for the purposes of economic prosperity and self-sustainability as a sea lane within the state. There's so much else going on in here that I like to capitalize upon, but I think that's the key. The key to economic diversification is to lift those repressive policies that currently govern us, that currently govern trade in the territory, that currently govern how far out from the reef we have jurisdiction. I think if we had full control over the Eitc, that in fact we could see so much more on the return of investment for this great Chamorro nation. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. Next, I'd like to call on Congressman Sam Nicholas. And the question we pose to you is going to be issues such as the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, and the COFA, or the Compact of Free Association amongst the U.S. and Federal States of Micronesia, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and Republic of Palau. This agreement continues to place a drain on our government's finances. If in office, how would you address these issues to lessen the adverse impact they bring towards our government's coffers? Congressman?
Thank you for the question, Ernie. I guess I'll tackle the compact impact issue first. The initial problem right now for a compact impact situation is that the reimbursement amounts that we are getting is grossly insufficient to our actual costs. It comes out to about $819 per migrant, when our cost for healthcare is almost $3,000, our cost to educate is almost $9,000, and our cost on EITC on a per citizen basis for that migrant is about $2,800. So we need to change the reimbursement formula. That's been a problem that didn't just materialize again in the last year or 9 months. That's been a problem for decades. And so we need to address that issue, and the opportunity is here for us to be able to do that with the implementation agreements currently being negotiated. In those implementation agreements, we've advocated for Guam issues on no less than 5 occurrences in the last year and a half. We've met with the ambassadors, we've met with the negotiators, we've spoken up in the Natural Resources Committee and in the Senate, all about trying to make sure that the Compact for Free Association is not going to be insufficient, not only for the needs of the people of Guam, but also for the needs of our brothers and sisters who live in our neighboring islands. So we're definitely working on addressing the reimbursement costs. We're working on making sure that Medicaid costs for the migrants are also being covered. We lost that in 1996. We're co-sponsoring a bill now with one of our colleagues to be able to get that on. So that's being handled on the compact impact. As far as EITC that I mentioned earlier, we've had about, I think 5 bills, was it, that we've gotten the language in already to get a 75% reimbursement. That language has passed the House, so we have pretty firm House commitment on that. We're going to continue following through on that commitment until we're able to get a breakthrough. Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, I'd like to ask Senator Castro, please give us your viewpoints on these 2 important issues.
Well, first of all, those 2 issues are indicative of a much bigger problem that faces the territory. We're seeing federal mandates and federal repressive policies on one hand, they negotiate on behalf of the people of Guam when we're part of the American family. But on the other hand, when it comes time to appropriate recompense in terms of the impact upon the community, it's left to the local coffer to absorb that. This issue with the Compact of Free Association is a perennial one, to the tune of $100 million in liabilities every year. I think the administration, now and in the past, has done a fine job in being able to articulate that to the best of our ability. Only recently has the federal government awarded an amount to be able to articulate a reporting mechanism that may be acceptable for due consideration for financial compensation associated with the compact. Both the COFA and the EITC are addressed at different levels. The COFA at the international level between 2 sovereign nations, the United States and unfortunately not us, but as represented by the United States and with all the participating freely associated states. I think the number one issue we can do, whoever's elected, is to show up at the table, to take notes, to be an advocate, to petition, to tell our story about what it is and the kind of impact it's having upon our infrastructure. GMH is a small example, one example of that equation, to the tune of anywhere from $18 to $30 million in uninsured or underinsured services provided to that demographic. In addition to that, EITC is just another conversation that's very similar in terms of a financial liability that extends certain privileges to a demographic in this community, and rightfully so. They deserve it. However, when it's left up to the local government to address that issue, we're left high and dry. Similarly with war claims, I support 1365 and Bill 181. I was one of the largest advocates, but again, we were left to pick up the tab and pay for that compensation ourselves. I think this is a time to send someone who's going to stand forward and advocate for a permanent solution and not have to petition time after time again for an amendment to the NDAA or special consideration on a seasonal basis for a final solution to address these age-old issues facing the people of Guam. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Next, I'd like to call on Dr. Underwood. Please give us your comments on these two issues.
Okay, very well. Well, the first issue is really how would, what actions or approaches I would take to present our message in Washington, D.C. Well, first of all, I want to assure you, the Guam Contractors Association, the Women's Chamber of Commerce, that my approach would be collaborative. I will try to seek input on a regular basis to make sure that we are presenting one voice in Washington. In specific terms, this requires a specific legislative strategy. In the legislative strategy, we could have had an amendment to the State Department reauthorization that carved out a role, maybe large, maybe small, for Guam to participate in the COFA renegotiations. Secondly, we cannot allow the agreements to go forward without having a Guam-specific package attached to it. And so I have proposed a $100 million compact impact package, which is way over the $30 million currently, and I would make sure that that be attached to the approval of the compact agreement. I would also make COFA migrants and maybe even COFA residents eligible for Medicare, so that our medically indigent program here at home is made whole, and maybe they won't migrate here just to get health care. It has been hard to seek these fixes in Congress, but the renegotiation of the COFA provides us an opportunity to correct this injustice. We need a specific legislative strategy. The payment of EITC is also connected to COFA migrants, although lagging wages across the board has created this ballooning of EITC payments over 500% in this century. As you know, we're a mirror tax code, but we certainly should argue, as has Delegate Plaskett, as has Delegate Sablan, for 100% reimbursement.
5 seconds.
Not 75%, 100%. I will spare no effort to do exactly that.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. And again, for anyone who's just now joining us, you are tuned in to the Guam Chamber of Commerce Congressional Forum, presented to you live on GoToWebinar. And our invited guests are Congressman Sam Nicholas, Senator Will Castro, and Dr. Robert Underwood. For this final question, I'm going to call upon Will Castro. And the question that we posed on this last question of the day is, if elected, what will be the priority issue you will champion for Guam in the United States House of Representatives? Senator Castro.
Well, thank you. I think there's an issue that's been adopted by the territory that we see that, in my opinion, is hasn't been closed out fully. I'd like to revisit the war claims and address the deadlines that have been passed. I'd like to address the funding source. I also like to look at the compensation to the net present value of what's due to each of the war claim survivors and or their dependents. Second, I think it's time to address the issues of Veterans Affairs, specifically veterans health care on Guam. If elected, I'd like to be given the tremendous privilege to network not just with ourselves, because we've been seeing what the historical opportunities have been and have been facing the veterans community, but perhaps to work with our northern neighbors to come at a partnership approach to establishing a regional veterans medical facility in partnership with the active military here, right up here at Naval Hospital. Those are the two things I hope, if I'm given the privilege to address, as my standing priority that's been articulated by the government of Guam. Of course, I have personal preferences in terms of policy directions and developing certain industries. Of course, there are other things that I like to address as part of my personal political platform. But I really believe that the sole advocate to represent the territory should carry forward the sentiments of the people of Guam as articulated either in the plans or public law and in direct communication with the heads of government. Those are the two long-standing perennial issues that we need closure on: war claims and Veterans Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Next, I'd like to call on Dr. Underwood to answer this final question.
Thank you for the opportunity again, Ernie. Almost all issues are equally important, whether seeking relief from federal regulations and mandates, the inclusion of our people in programs now close to us, or the extension of healthcare to the most vulnerable, and educational opportunities for all. But after public health conditions return to a near normal, the most important matter is to pay attention to our homeland's economic recovery. Economic recovery can only come through the creation of new jobs and new industries. Diversification, I'm sad to say, diversification. If people are not working and earning an income, most other dimensions of our lives diminish equally. There will be federal support for jobs in yet a third recovery package, which will certainly be developed in the next Congress and will give us this opportunity to put people back to work. But I will also urge in that package money given to entrepreneurs to invest in new industries. And we're taking full advantage for our workforce and for our contractors for the military buildup. The visitor industry will recover, but not as quickly, and will take significant federal partnership through immigration initiatives and the promotion of safe air routes to and from Guam, as I outlined earlier. Before the pandemic, we needed economic diversification. We need it now more than ever. A new knowledge-based economy, a new circular economy, helps us create opportunities for jobs that take us to new levels of success. The next economic recovery package must not just create jobs, but give companies and entrepreneurs opportunities to secure needed funds to build businesses that build on our sustainable strengths. A major opportunity still awaits us in our understanding as the crossroads of the Pacific, not just as the military used to say, but as the home for undersea cables, for high-tech opportunities, in creating data centers and a potential data hub protected by US law here on Guam while we sit on the edge of Asia. Our positioning could not be better, but it will take local commitment, clearing away any federal impediments and finding ways for investors to see us as a natural place to do business. We're obviously adept at conveying messages in addition to the 5G DoD program and the cyber structure that could be placed in the National Guard. We are poised for a significant economic recovery.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood, for your comments. Now for the final question and final respondent, please call on Congressman Sam Nicholas.
Thank you, Ernie. You know, when you ask for just one answer, you know you're not going to get just one answer when you have people who are running for office trying to make sure that we touch on everything. The number one thing, the reason why, one of the biggest reasons why I ran for Congress, and I want to definitely keep working on it, is supplemental security income for our people. That's something that's just incredibly near and dear to my heart with my boy. And it's something that, you know, as long as I'm in this office and as long as that's not accomplished, I'm just going to have to keep pushing for that. That's absolutely a huge priority issue for me. We have so many people who would be able to benefit from that. It's something that we can, I think, achieve, especially with the current progress in the courts speaking towards that. So if I can close that off, that would just be really, really special on a personal level for me. But in addition to that, one of the things that we also want to make sure we follow through on is HR 1713 that we're working on to acknowledge the fact that there was Agent Orange, or at the very least dioxin, used on our military bases. That not only made those veterans that were exposed to it sick, but it made every veteran that came home and drank from that same water lens, it made them sick. It made so many of our families who drank that water, it made them sick. And we need to take the long and hard process necessary for us to not only get the federal government to acknowledge that, but to do so in a strategic way so that we can get that domino effect in place where 1713 will acknowledge it for our veterans, and that domino will continue following so that it gets all the way to acknowledging that impact to our people. I think those are two very very special areas that I would like to continue working on, and I really would like the opportunity to get that done. Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you, Congressman. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank the candidates today for taking the time to prepare and participate in today's Congressional Candidate Forum sponsored by the Guam Chamber of Commerce. We hope today's forum gave you some insight to each candidate's dedication, preparation, qualifications, and passion to represent Guam and all of us in the 117th House of Representatives and in the administration. On behalf of the Guam Chamber of Commerce, the Board of Directors, its management and staff, we thank you all for being with us today. We wish you all good health and keep up the vigilance against the pandemic COVID-19. Sus Masi and good day.